Hey everyone, and how's it going? Bowserthehealer here, and I finally got my hands on Disc Priest, and I'm going to tell you and show you what I'll be doing with it in Season 3. This isn't going to be the first healer I play, probably going to play Mistweaver and Prez first, but early on in my adventures, I'll be on the Discipline Priest, and I have the two builds I'll be running for you all, but I also want to go over all of the wonderful changes that Disc has received. It's probably its most accessible right now, so I want to provide some of the changes to you all to maybe take some of the intimidation factor out if you were looking to get into this absolutely fun and terrific caster. Now, as per usual, this is Mythic Plus focus, so I'm not going to be talking about raid too much. And of course, hey, I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, so if you like healing content, hit subscribe. It means the world to me. And let's dive right into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through the changes so that you can know what's making Discipline Priest so much more accessible right now. And then I'll go through the two builds that I plan on running, and then I'll go through sort of my thoughts on viability from beginners in Mythic Plus all the way to the MDI. So let's jump in. The big two changes that really cleaned up this kit is Mindbender and Shadow Fiend, right? Which is just Mindbender for us right now. That is our Shadow Covenant button. So you no longer have to press Shadow Covenant. You simply press Mindbender and you get Shadow Covenant, which is a great change. So if you want to transform into that form, there you go. That's all you had to do. And now you're blasting with shadow damage. It's a really great change. And I have to say, it feels 10 out of 10 to play that way. Also, so does Mind Blast. I'm sad we don't get two charges of it, as it is a very fun button to press. But this is now additionally Schism. So when you hit Mind Blast, the target will take 10% more magic damage. It also always gives you a power of the dark side, empowering your penance. So you're kind of big chilling. As long as you've hit Mind Blast, you should be able to get a pretty big heal out, let alone any kind of ramping you do afterwards. Now, what this means is Twilight Equilibrium, which is a pretty mandatory talent for most players, and I think you can get away without running it, but hear me out, I think it's worth learning. Twilight Equilibrium makes it so you do, what was it, 15% more damage? Yeah, 15% more damage using a different type of spell. So if I hit Smite, that's Holy. Now I need to cast something Shadow. So I hit Mind Blast, and then I'll go into Shadow Covenant and hit Purge the Wicked. That's Light. Now I need to press Dark, hit my Dark Reprimand, and that's going to do more damage because of Twilight Equilibrium. And I'm just going to keep ping-ponging. Light, Dark, Light, Dark, Light, etc. However, the rule of thumb here, the big rule here, is to simply try to always Twilight Equilibrium a penance. Now, you might not always get every penance, but you can get every Dark Reprimand, the Shadow Covenant Dark Penance. So just ping pong between your moves whenever you're trying to hit penance. Otherwise, you can keep slamming Smite because it does more damage with the current tier set. In Shadow Covenant, it hits twice, but it reduces the cooldown of Mindbender. In one of my builds, it'll also reduce the cooldown of penance. And of course, it's just letting you stack and hold on to a Twilight Equilibrium for when it's time to press a shadow move. You can slam it for the extra damage and then go right to Holy and start that ping pong process. I also take Mind Games specifically so that if I need one more shadow button in order to press penance, I actually always have access to it. You can invest more points into here if you want Mind Games to feel a bit better. However, the simple Mind Games button itself with a 45-second cooldown, I think is good enough for allowing us to have just one more Twilight Equilibrium. And it hits decently hard enough. Now, the healing from this is pretty great, right? If I just, we'll hope this works in the PTR land, but we're gonna go right into Shadow Covenant. I'm gonna send a Mind Blast, a Purge the Wicked, and then a Dark Reprimand, Shadow or Death to get the big strike out of my Mindbender. And then we're gonna spam Smite here for a little bit. And then our Dark Reprimand's ready. And even there, I was hitting about 140k healing. And what, 50 to 60 single target damage? We might have cleaved onto this dummy, but that's still some very impressive damage and healing with a cooldown that comes back in less than 30 seconds, generally speaking. So I love this, right? Without PI, without Rapture ramping or a power pot, anything. That worked pretty well for me. So I really like this. Now there's two builds I'm running. I want to go over this one first because this is very similar to live right now. You can pick Barrier or Luminous Barrier if you want something a little more pug friendly. Divine Aegis and Blaze of Light are both hard to get because these both cost 2 points on retail, but Divine Aegis only costs 1 here, and I believe they freed up some of the talent bloat here. It's actually possible to get Blaze of Light and Divine Aegis. Divine Aegis was anywhere from 6 on the low end to 9% bonus healing. Now, it's creating little shields, and those shields are spread across 5 different players, right? So it gives the effect works on each individual player that it procs on, but it's not like, how do I put it? It's certainly helping you heal throughout a dungeon, but I don't know how impactful it actually is. It does scale really nice with crit. So the answer is this is good healing, and if you want a little additional healing assistance at the cost of, say, a couple of other buttons you could press, this isn't a bad one. However, I did come up with one other build that I really liked. It goes into Ultimate Penitence and ditches Divine Aegis, which is tragic. However, I felt like it didn't feel much different to play. And if you don't want to reduce the cooldown of Ultimate Penitence, if you're fine with a 4-minute, you can even dip over here for 1 more bolt on your Radiance cast. So when you cast Radiance, you'll fire 1 more bolt on Penance, which is really nice for quickly cleaning up a party. If you're really uncomfortable with Twilight Equilibrium, you can do something like this, which is very safe. I don't recommend this though, as the value you get out of learning Twilight Equilibrium is 100% worth it. Now, what is so great about this build, and I actually missed a talent up here because I want to talk about these two, is this build is puggable. For you pug stars out there who love to pug and play alone or play with a single friend, this is how you carry a group. Now, are you going to carry a group much better? No. This still struggles with groups that take way too much excessive damage. Its throughput is only so good. Well, in Mythic Plus. The Luminous Barrier works really well on targets that already have Atonement. So if you hit a Radiance and then you know people are about to die, you can smack a Luminous Barrier and get a nice chunky shield on your whole team. That'll save a life. It's a 3-minute cooldown, and with Ultimate Penitence at a 4-minute, that's a bit tough, but I don't know if you've read the tooltip. 443,000 holy damage to enemies, or 1 million healing to allies over 5 seconds. And if you haven't seen this move, you hover up in the air, you gain 50% of your health as shield, so that you survive. You're immune to loss of control effects. It is not affected by Shadow Covenant, so you do not, in fact, get like a Shadow Covenant version of Ultimate Penitence, although that would have been sick, Blizzard. Hit a Schism, pop the Radiance, fly up into the air, and just rain down penance. This is such a cool ability. It's really helpful. It'll keep your parties alive. You're doing just so much healing through Atonement. You're doing so much healing through healing. I honestly love it. I think it feels great. However, this might not be to everyone's liking. This might not be your favorite build, but there's a lot of viability down here, and I think it's worth playing around with. I felt comfortable in 20s scaled to 440 item level. While the dungeons will be changing on live and the gear will be changing, I get the feeling that we'll be fine with these two builds. Now, let's talk about viability while I throw some of my PTR footage on screen. In terms of viability right now, on the lower end of the spectrum, again, carrying is hard. That is single-handedly the hardest part about playing Disc, is if players take too much damage and they're getting hit by mechanics and things that they should avoid, you only got so many buttons to save people's lives before they start falling over. If you're in a rhythm and people are doing a good job of mitigating damage and not taking tons of excessive amounts, you're fine. So in lower keys, this can be tough. In Keystone Hero to 20, as long as your group's even relatively competent, you should feel on top of the world as disciplined. Now, you might want to run something more pug-friendly like what I'm running to maybe account for players making mistakes, but that is something that you have agency over as a player that we didn't really have before. So I'm happy about that. And then in the 20 and beyond category, the precision, of course, goes up. You need to be more accurate with your heals. You need to be ramping correctly. You can't be missing healing windows because players might just fall over, and you don't want to be mid-ramp by the time you're at 10% HP because there's a real chance that you die before the giga damage comes in. But that being said, at higher levels of play, players are usually better about defensives and group defensives and kicks, and it should feel good, and you're providing power infusion. It's still a strong move, even though it got nerfed, and you're going to allow priority targets to die quicker. You're going to ramp faster, and that's going to only scale more and more with Keystone level because you'll be giving it to a player who likely scales with Keystone level pretty well. Now, in the world record side of things, I can't tell you if it's going to work or not. World records are really dependent on what barriers they hit in pushing a next key, like what's doing too much damage, what feels unkillable, right? What isn't survivable anymore, and can Disc offset that? So you're not going to know if it's in world records until it's there, but I think it's viable for being a world record contender. And for the MDI, it provides power infusion, group-wide defensive, and all a wonderful damage profile because it now can do AoE, but it also has a decent single target. Now, the throughput's tough, so if the MDI keys requires pulling so much that a disc can't heal it, well, that'll be where it struggles the most. However, if the disc can handle it, it's looking pretty strong. Disc will basically always have a shot at being viable as long as Power Infusion works the way it does with the, I think it's called the Twin Priestess ability. Yeah, Twins of the Sun Priestess. It's always likely to be viable. Now, that being said, should you play it? This is the time. If you've been wanting to learn disc, it looks cool, but it's challenging, this is the time. Now, no, if you're with a bad group or a group that doesn't kick, I had a boss fight where like nobody was kicking the two mobs in Everbloom, and it was so much healing, and I could not keep up in a 20 Tyrannical. It's actually Tyrannical Fortified. It was hell on earth. Yeah, you're not going to make it, right? Like, you don't have throughput like, say, a Mistweaver does. But this is the time, right? While it's technical, while it has some tougher learning bits to it, you learn it now, you'll be set for life, right? It's kind of like learning a bike. Once you understand how disc works, it's just a matter of knowing what Blizzard has changed to the spec, and you'll be right back on your feet because the concept of discipline has remained the same as long as I've played it since Shadowlands. So I hope you give it a try. I really, really do. And I think one of my favorite parts as somebody who's a Mistweaver enjoyer is that it doesn't really walk on Mistweaver's feet at all, which is something I was always worried about. This feels like less throughput, more mitigation, and a really nice buff, where Mistweaver has incredible healing throughput and an uncanny survivability on a personal level, and a mobility that I think in a crowd control set that is cherished by, I think, a lot of groups. So Mistweaver, while it might still be underrepresented because people sleep on my favorite, Discipline and Mist don't feel like they're like the same thing, but conceptually they work on similar starting points, do damage to heal. And I actually think that's like some really cool game design, but I'm not going to rant about that today. That's it for this one. If you guys enjoyed the content, please drop me a comment or something, especially if you have any questions or want to share your own thoughts. And of course, again, get subscribed if you like this kind of content on that road to 10K, and I'll see you all in the next one.